Hello, I'm Ethan Chazin, a New York City-based small business growth coach. I am a fractional chief people officer and culture transformation change agent for the organizations that I'm fortunate enough to work with. I want to talk today about a really important aspect of business continuity planning that most owners and leaders fail to strategically address, and that is workforce planning. That is taking a look at where your organization needs to be as far as talent acquisition, talent management, and where you currently are. And the premise behind effectively managing your strategic workforce planning is this. It's adaptation to change, and it's being resilient, enabling you to better, more effectively navigate chaos and uncertainty. So let's dive into today's topic, which is, again, strategic workforce planning. It's a succession planning in an era of abject uncertainty, which certainly we live in today. So having said that, where do we go? Your job as a leader of your organization, the value that you bring to all of your people is measured by your ability to plan for the future when it comes to the people side of the business. So that's what John Maxwell, noted business theorist, said. But when we talk about your business, we talk about three aspects, right? There are three levers that you can tweak. One is your strategy. And I don't care how successful your strategy is. If you don't have the right people on board to implement, you're going to struggle. So the first is strategy. That's not the purposes of today's talk. The second lever that you can pull is operational efficiency. Everybody, and I mean everybody nowadays, has access to the requisite tools that are needed: automation, technology transformation, change agent tools, things like AI, ChatGPT, EOS implementers and integrators, supply chain management, dashboard reporting. Everybody has access to the tools, right? But what we don't have yet in 2025 is a handle on our ability to strategically manage our people. So what's the agenda for today? I want to talk about the business imperative for planning, especially right now with what's going on in America. There are three aspects of planning: ongoing planning from a people perspective, emergency planning for when suddenly you have vacancies, especially at the top on your leadership team, and continuity people strategies. What your plan has got to include, why your people always come first. Another aspect of strategic workforce management is coaching, mentoring, and sponsoring. I want to talk to you about the benefit of long-term planning. And then the three Ps. The three Ps are policies, procedures, and processes. Developing a SWOT. I know most people think of SWOT analysis as a marketing discipline, but a SWOT analysis or a SWOT plan applied to your people management strategy. And then I want to recap what we addressed today. So the need to plan is critical. That's beyond debate. So we know, according to Forbes, only 10 to 17% of companies appoint a new CEO every year. And according to ATD, the Association for Talent Development, only 1 out of 3 companies have a formal succession plan process. And per Deloitte Consulting, 86% of companies that are surveyed, their leaders consider succession planning an urgent, important priority. So 86% consider succession planning urgent. Only 14% report doing a good job at it. And then I want to talk about the benefit of ongoing versus emergency succession. Ongoing is a 365-day a year, constant, day in, day out, long-term view plan for your workforce development. Emergency is when unexpectedly a vacancy popped up. So again, especially on your leadership team. So all of a sudden, a chief leader on your team leaves, and now all of a sudden you're in scramble mode. So I want to talk about the distinction between those. So what are the three kinds of succession planning when it comes to strategic workforce planning? Ongoing, the purpose is you're constantly looking at both your short and your long-term horizon, especially critical positions, and it's a gap analysis. It's constantly looking at the totality of your workforce management. And that's what I do as a consultant. I go in and I do a workforce audit of the ongoing, the emergency, and the business continuity planning. So that's the purpose of the ongoing succession plan. It's both short-term, immediate horizon, and longer-term time frame is ongoing. The characteristics are you're constantly looking at your pipeline, your people, trends in workforce development, trends in the kind of things that impact your talent acquisition, talent management. And what it looks like is you have a bench of a number of suitable candidates you've identified, both in-house currently on staff, as well as outside the organization, candidates that in a pinch you could bring in to fill vacancies. So that's ongoing succession planning. Emergency succession planning is certain individuals who are in such a key role that if they were to leave you suddenly, you'd be well positioned to fill those vacancies. You're taking a longer term view because these, again, are people who are more strategically aligned with the success of your business. So that's emergency succession planning. It's a longer term perspective. You're looking out into the future, again, as in ongoing succession planning. But the distinction is these are emergency backfill or vacancy fill. Characteristics of emergency succession planning is you've identified people already on board who are ready to take a step up into a leadership role. And that's, by the way, where sponsorship programs come. Sponsorship is part of coaching and mentoring. But that's emergency situations. You are already prepared to identify candidates. Why? Are you prepared in advance for emergencies? Because as we all know, life in general, when emergencies pop up and you're scrambling to deal with them, more often than not, things become problematic. And then what does emergency succession planning look like in practice? Well, when I come into an organization and I consult with them, we identify specific individuals who have the requisite skills, background, talent, are predisposed and already been identified as successors to vacancies in these highly critical roles. That's emergency succession planning. So what's the third kind of succession planning that's required? It's business continuity planning. So the distinction or difference between business continuity and emergency or ongoing is you have certain individuals who you've identified could be suitable replacements in case positions become available due to vacancies. But the distinction is with business continuity planning, there's a requisite amount of career and professional development. You need to cultivate these future leaders. The time frame is for business continuity planning, it's a short term. If somebody were to leave, you have a candidate in place that you've nurtured and cultivated who can step in on a temporary interim basis. That's why there's such a popularity now. You may see all these titles of interim C-suite staff or even fractional roles. That's what business continuity planning is about. It's filling on a short-term basis people or roles rather that you will need to fill on a permanent basis. Consider it this way. Business continuity planning is finding short-term viable candidate solutions, ideally in-house, who at a minimum give you temporary respite or a break, a breather, by having them step into a role on a contingency plan basis where it gives you the ability to then plan more strategically how you're going to fill the position moving forward. Characteristics of business continuity planning, you identify the individuals who have the capacity to maintain your operational continuity. These are the people who, if worst case scenario, your star, your rising star, or a noted member of your leadership team, if they were to leave, you've got somebody already on your bench. It ensures business continuity, what we call strategic overlap of these most critical roles. Typically, if your organization requires on certain attributes like supply chain management, inventory management, customer call center expertise, if there's specific areas of your incredible strength in your organization, you want the leaders of those areas of strength, you've already got a succession plan in place. So these are the three kinds of succession planning or strategic workforce management: ongoing, emergency, and short-term business continuity. So Why do we go through this process? What are the many benefits, which unfortunately not enough organizations are dealing with? You're setting your organization up as a founder, as an owner. You're setting up your ability to exit the company, leaving it in the strongest suitable position for continued success. That's what you're doing. In other words, your exit strategy, when you do strategic workforce management, becomes your legacy, a positive lasting legacy. So what do we also know when we look about the totality of America's workforce today? We know that there's a significant trend, has been going on for a few years now, in case you've been asleep at the wheel. Boomers and matures are exiting both voluntarily and involuntarily every day in the tens of thousands in the American workforce. There's a transition going on. And as these boomers and matures, these more experienced, tenured people are leaving the workforce, there's a requisite need to backfill this intellectual capital, as it were, with these rising star millennial Gen Zs who have less tenure, but we've identified more capability. Doing this avoids leadership disruption and any inherent instability when you're scrambling to fill vacancies. And we know if you've ever filled a position of importance in an emergency basis, there can be often is a tremendous amount of chaos. Also, this prepares you, doing this kind of ongoing strategic workforce management, change resilience planning. It allows you to constantly identify who you need to prepare to fill in your workforce. And again, when I go in and I do an audit of an organization's workforce vitality, I'm specifically looking at who the organization in the short and long-term time frame need to consider hiring. So you may yourself have used the phrases great resignation, silent quitting, the inherent complaints, of which there are many about Gen Z employees, some founded, some well-founded, some not so well-founded. But these strategic workforce planning strategies enable you to overcome some of these talent acquisition challenges. The other driving force that's really powerful behind strategic workforce management, your compensation may likely not be aligned with your people strategy. So let me tell you something. When I hear organizations, prospects say to me, you know, our payroll is our largest expense, and we don't know what percent of that we're getting a logical workforce employee ROI. We're not sure where our money's wasted. Your people are not an expense. That is a BS, lazy way to think about your people. As I said earlier, you've got three levers to pull in terms of strategically guiding your business to continued success: your strategy, your operational efficiency, and your people. The people side, it's warm, it's fuzzy, it's uncomfortable. So a lot of leadership teams, a lot of owners, founders, they don't address strategically the people side, but it's an opportunity to do this kind of workforce assessment. I use this in my consulting as a tool to rethink your compensation. So here's my question for you. It's a rhetorical, and reach out to me so we can talk about an actual answer to this. How do you find out for your non-revenue generating staff, your back office support, your admin, the ones in your organization who don't generate revenue per se, but they keep your business operational? How do you determine an equitable, logical compensation for them? And it has nothing to do with what market you're in, what industry sector, what geographic location, and what your competitors are paying. Those are necessary goalposts to kick the football through, but they're not in and of themselves directionally insightful. And then the purpose of planning is, we all know, in the same way that you do a strategic plan on an annual basis, the benefit of the plan, in this case, a workforce strategic planning document, the benefit is not to create a nice Microsoft Word document, put it on the shelf or in your archive and just forget about it. The benefit of planning is to start to address these very, very difficult, challenging considerations of building a high functioning organization. So what goes into your planning process? Your strategic workforce plan has got to have your goals. What do you want your people's strategies to accomplish? Dealing with external marketplace considerations, dealing with preparing your organization for a likely cycle of turnover in staff, preparing your organization to have talent that's necessary for success in the future, whatever your goals are. And by the way, in the same way, individual and team goals need to be measurable, your organizational strategic workforce management goals need to be measurable. Measurable is numeric, meaning we need to be able to go in, and when I look at an organization's strategic workforce management goals, they need to be able to be identified as being, yes, we can achieve those. So the requirements of the task management, what are your people going to need to perform today, tomorrow, and well into the future? And this isn't going to be something that you can always complete a complete view. It's kind of like the game we had when we were growing up, the Etch-a-Sketch, where you would draw it with the knobs and then you just shake it and it disappears. The requirement's going to be somewhat fuzzy because they're going to adapt with things that you can't anticipate, like external marketplace conditions, advances in technology and transformation, shifts and changes in marketplace conditions, like, oh, there's a new tariff war, or we're going to war tomorrow with this former trading partner. Those are things that are outside our control, but you've got to document the tasks or the requirements of the work to be produced by your people. The timeline. How much and what extent of employee development is there? This is a challenge that I face constantly in my consulting. Most individuals who are leading, owning, running organizations don't consider their people to be a requisite investment. They call them expenses. No, part of developing your strategic workforce plan is to identify the investment you need to make into the aggregate totality of your workforce, and then on an individual and team basis. What is the budget that you have? What are the resources you're going to need to invest in your people? And how are you going to introduce and execute and measure results of your workforce strategic plan? So, what do we need? You need to have an ownership or leadership transition plan. How are you going to move people up? How are you going to move them across? And how are you going to move the next person into ownership of your company? So it's far too many people are reaching out to M&A experts and they're leading into exit strategists to consult on how to sell the business and how to move away from the business, but they haven't done the precursor heavy lifting of preparing the company for success on a people basis of having a transitional plan in place. So you've got two levels to this. Your leadership ownership team, the people who are driving the strategy of your organization, that's top line. And then you have your staff succession, the lower, middle, and frontline client-facing staff. So you need employees that are ready to step in and succeed in new roles. Well, that's the onus of responsibility is on you to do the requisite planning to prepare them for success. And then, of course, my biggest frustration, I spent 20 years in corporate America and then 20 years as a coach consultant. I will tell you an aggregate, subjective, biased observation I bring to the table with my client consulting work over 40 years in private sector. HR is not an advocate of strategic planning. They just don't do it. They don't know how to do it. They're not trained on how to do succession planning. It's not an expertise. So leaders on your team, they'll leave your organization. Most people will leave your organization. It's rare to find somebody who's going to commit to your organization for the life of their effective career. Your succession, your strategic workforce management plan has got to include your HR strategies for retaining and recruiting top candidates. And so what does that mean? I'm going to say something a little bit, or hopefully not too confrontational to you right now, and that's the following. It is the height of insanity to continue filling vacancies with job descriptions. That is not a strategy for success in the 21st century, constant transitioning and changing workforce dynamics. It's just not. All world-class organizations, and I researched them over the decade I spent looking into what ultimately became my second book I wrote in 2018 called The Compassionate Organization. Strategic people-first organizations understand that HR, human resources, has ownership of driving talent acquisition, talent retention, with a view towards that shifting landscape of boomers, matures leaving, and now you have the two fastest growing and largest segments of the American sixth generation workforce are millennials and Gen Zs. Why do I say six? When you have matures, boomers, Gen Xers, millennials, Gen Zs, alphas. Alphas born between 2010 and 2025 are 15, 16 years old, the oldest ones, and starting to work summer internships. So add alphas to the mix in your future strategic planning document. You've got six generations that HR and your people, thought leaders in your organization need to account for. So what are we going to talk about? We're going to talk about, and I can consult with you on the following. What is your exit strategy? What are the roles that you need today and moving forward to ensure continuity and success from a people perspective? Who are you going to need to bring in and retain? How are you going to address this notion of people who have emotionally checked out, who have quit? They're unhappy with your workplace culture. That's another thing we haven't talked about is the hand-in-hand relationship between an amazing workplace culture, building a great place to work, and a people-first strategy. And I can talk with you one-on-one about the culture consideration that fuels your talent management, your workforce strategic succession planning. So, having said that, your people always come first. So I am certified in a number of workforce development training methodologies. One of them is referred to as 9-box. And so what does that mean? We look at your workforce in terms of the potential that they bring and the performance that they achieve. And so what does that mean? Low potential, low performance, get rid of them. Low performance, medium potential is referred to as a dilemma. You've got to address it. But low performance and high potential, that's an enigma, a mystery. You need to figure out what it is that there's a disconnect between the people who you thought had amazing potential and why they're not performing. It could be a combination or either or of them or you as an organization and your individuals. So performance that's in the mid-range. Low potential, but moderate performance. They're the ones who just leave them alone, let them do the work. They're the lifers. They function at a suitable performance level without a high level of fulfillment required. But your core employees are performing at mid-range, and they're also mid-potential. They're the ones that you need to think about, and most often they require career and professional development planning that's forward-looking. And that's your responsibility as much as their own, these core employees. So what about people who are moderate in performance but have high potential? Again, they're one of the three groups of people classified. You can see it here on the screen in orange. They are high potential individuals. And you need to think about all of these three groups, the green who are kind of not sure or underperformers, the blue who are your core trusted, and your orange are your high potentials. So moderate performance, but high potential, their growth. Your responsibility is to grow them. So now when we look at high performers, but low potential, these are people who are performing beyond you would think beyond their stated capabilities. They're your trusted professionals. They're committed. They are your VIP brand ambassadors. They're performing at a high level relative to how you thought they'd perform. They're the surprise, the positive surprises. Oh, wow. Whereas the underperformers are the negative surprises, trusted professionals who are performing at a high level. Give them what they need, keep them happy. But then what do you get when you get a high performer who's got medium potential? They're the high impact performer. And then they're, again, career and professional development, succession planning to identify where you want to sponsor them to advance them into future higher roles as future leaders. And then that gets us to the ultimate category in this 9-box performance potential model is the future leader. High performance, high potential. The fact that I'm talking about strategic workforce planning is because of your whole workforce for sure in total, but your future leaders specifically. So HR, I told you I'm not a fan of HR in the aggregate. I'm not a fan given how I was treated for 20 years in corporate America, because HR is supposed to be the folks who want the seat at the management table, who are the bridge or the intermediary between your leadership team and your frontline staff. And they've abrogated, I believe, in many instances, their responsibility of leadership in that capacity. However, HR succession, HR role in strategic workforce management is to create the clear metrics, measurable outcomes for succession planning, define the key positions and the position profiles that are needed for success in your particular business, in your industry, in your geographic location, those key positions. Build a strong talent pipeline. It's not enough to leverage AI to just bring in an ocean of candidates. That's BS. That's lazy talent acquisition. That's lazy recruiting. You want to be more strategic. It's always better to go hunting with a sniper rifle, not a shotgun. Then you end up standing next to Dick Cheney and getting shotgun blast in your butt. You don't want to strategically recruit like Japanese tuna trolling fishing vessels where they cast out miles-long nets. You want to be very specific in identifying position profiles. Assess, design, develop, implement, evaluate the ADDIE model of desirable career experiences and professional development for your stars. And then the last is career growth trajectory. So many times, less tenured professionals, those millennials and Gen Zs with high expectations of their own career aspirations, they leave, maybe not because of how they were treated, although that is often the case, but because they don't see a potential path forward. This is an opportunity to reduce their leaving by creating clear, defined, mutually agreed on paths. I want to talk about coaching, mentoring, and sponsorship. So many people get this wrong. But here's what the three are and are not. Coaching is when you're identifying performance that's measurable with work outputs. You're saying, I'm going to help you. We're going to give you a coach to help you increase your performance in a measurable way in the current role. So it's specific, it's actionable. Think about SMART goals for career and professional development, but performance also. So what coaching is it's very specific, tangible, result driven. Mentoring is aligning an individual with somebody who can give them less specific, less measurable career and professional guidance. So a mentor is somebody who's a sounding board, giving the benefit of the experience that they possess. Sponsorship, and often sponsorship is applicable in professional services firms, accounting, audit, the law, the legal profession. Sponsorship is when a senior member of your leadership team has identified candidates who are high potential, high performers, and they take them under the wing and say, I will vouch for this individual. I will sponsor them for career and professional development opportunities in our organization's strategic workforce planning strategy. So sponsorship is somebody taking ownership of being accountable for somebody else's success in being promoted. So in the long term, succession planning will strengthen your organization in a few very key specific ways. You've identified positions and opportunities where if there is or becomes a vacancy, you've already got a bench in place, ready to go. Emergency situation doesn't matter. Longer term planning doesn't matter. General continuity planning doesn't matter. We've got a bench in place. And this is often why I'm brought into organizations to do consulting for them. We also identify a path forward in terms of, for our business continuity, this is the requisite skills, background, experience, client engagement, cultural diversity, language proficiency, software development, all those skills that we may need in the future, we got. We got because we've planned it. And then we've identified the individuals who can help us get there, the bridge, cross the bridge, the divide from where we are present with our workforce planning and where we need to be. We cross the bridge by identifying the people who can lead us across, and we develop them. The next aspect of this strategic workforce management planning I want to talk to is the 3 Ps, your policies, procedures, and processes. So very quickly, I have found these 3 Ps are often lacking in organizations, and here's why. Your policies. Yes, are you in compliance with applicable state and federal hiring, employment, anti-discrimination laws? But the landscape that we're faced with is like Etch-a-Sketch or quicksand. It's shifting or shape shifting under our feet pretty much on a day in, day out basis. So your policies need to be flexible and adaptive. They can't be set in stone. It's interesting, oftentimes as a joke almost, I'll ask an organization I'm talking about working with for their employee handbook. And I go to the policy section. And they were written, if at all, they were written years ago in a prior lifetime. God forbid they were written pre-COVID. So the policies need to be revisited on a frequent basis, not a once a year, which is BS. It's lazy. It's taking a look back in time. You want to be forward thinking in all of this. So your policies need to reflect that forward vision. Procedures. Is your handbook up to date? You can get a preferred employer organization or your HR department or an outside employee handbook consultant. There's expertise to be found pretty easily and relatively inexpensively to come in immediately and revisit your talent acquisition, talent management procedures, processes. I started my career after I graduated from college as a recruiter with a staffing agency. So I have spent 40 some odd years looking at the outdated self-defeating procedures that many organizations, startups, all the way to multinational corporations, they all struggle with. So policies and procedures, but then your processes. Do you have your people strategy documented in terms of the work that needs to get done, how it gets done from an optimal efficiency and productivity perspective? This is a rhetorical question because I know anecdotally 99% of organizations don't have these processes. Why? I ask for it. I say, show me. Don't talk to me. Show me your processes and how you've communicated them and continue to communicate them on a day in, day out basis with your people. Do you have resiliency, redundancy through your job sharing, rotations, cross training? These are all viable 21st century strategies that world-class organizations like Wegmans and Trader Joe's and Nucor Steel and General Electric and DuPont and Warby Parker, they all share these processes for talent management. The last is something that Daniel Pink talked about in terms of giving people 4 aspects of work autonomy or control over what they do. The 4 levers of autonomy are letting your people decide themselves what they work on, who they work with, when they work, and where they work from. And if you don't do that, you're not treating your people like adults, responsible adults. You don't trust them. And therefore, this entire concept or process, if it's implemented by you, of strategic workforce management, it's a moot point because you're not going to succeed in this if you don't trust and give your people control. It's the democratization of that prior 20th century pyramid command control structure to a flatter matrix organization where control over work, ownership of work, is spread down the chain of command. But that requires trust. It requires maybe fundamentally re-architecting your talent acquisition strategy to go away from job descriptions and over to hiring, behavioral interviewing for people's attributes, behaviors, qualities, and characteristics of top performers. So a SWOT analysis. I talked earlier in my introduction that the marketing folks are not the only ones who do a SWOT analysis. SWOT is strengths and weaknesses. You're assessing inside your organization from a human capital standpoint and outside opportunities and threats that are outside your organization. So it allows you to identify both the positives and the challenges of your current organization structure, your strategy, your operations, and your people planning. People planning is what we're talking about today in the strategic workforce planning video. The SWOT analysis, strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, threats, is a great way of objectively and in as unbiased a fashion as possible examine the attributes and challenges of your organization's workforce as it's currently constructed and in its ability for you to achieve lasting business continuity and success into the future. It helps you identify growth opportunities and gives you a plan, a people plan for suitable succession. A well-executed people-first strategy SWOT analysis includes recommendations to increase the overall performance and productivity of your people, which drives profitability and financial success. There is a straight-through correlation, cause and effect, between creating an amazing workplace in terms of composition of your workforce and financially outperforming your competitors. I spent a decade researching this. In my second book, Compassionate Organization, this is known. There's decades of data to support this now. It's not a warm, fuzzy, feely, touchy, kind of nice, altruistic thing. You need to do this SWOT analysis and strategic workforce management because your people will drive the future success of your organization. So this is what a SWOT analysis applied to a people strategy looks like. And if you're interested, I can send it to you. But the strengths and weaknesses are inside your organization's people focus, and your opportunities and threats are external people considerations outside your current workforce. And I'll just let this kind of waft over you for a moment. So, just very quickly to give a summary of the SWOT analysis from a people strategy perspective, your strengths are the strengths of your business, competitive advantages, is your reputation solid from a people perspective? And we know there are organizations that already objectively have been assessed in this. Ethisphere, great place to work, culture scores of whatever tool or resource you're looking for. They abound, they're abundant, they exist. You can identify pretty quickly objective third-party external organizations who will assess your organization's culture and people strategies. So those are your strengths. Your weaknesses, maybe your reputation of your employees, maybe you have high turnover, maybe your culture's destroyed, class action lawsuit, unhappy employees. You cut back due to external influences on your DE&I initiatives, whatever. You've created a weakness in your internal organization, your people inside your organization. There's problems. External viewpoint, opportunities. As I said before, Gen Zs, alphas, highly culturally diverse, highly language proficient, employees who possess amazing amounts of technological skills, employees who are comfortable working in nebulous, less than clearly defined workplace environments, employees who have grown up with chaos and uncertainty, so they can easily adapt it. And then the threats are outside your organization. What are the challenges? I hear it every day in some permutation of Gen Zs are this, Gen Zs are not. That's bullshit. That is a cop-out. Why do I say that with such abject certainty? I spent 17 going on 18 years in my practice of teaching at 12 colleges and universities. I've taught over 5,000 Gen Zs and some millennials. This complaint that workforce, people, these younger professionals, don't do this, don't do that. Sure, there are considerations in a sixth-generation workforce. Every generation possesses certain attributes. But that's not the reason your organization is struggling in terms of external considerations or threats to your workforce viability. So, as we wrap things up here today, I understand that this is a long video. I appreciate you staying with me, but there is nothing more important than you and your organization taking a time out. We're in July 2025, so it's the third quarter of the year. We now have decades of data to support our fundamental foundational beliefs in the need to build an amazing workforce that will ensure lasting competitive advantage. So I'll ask again, how are you going to apply what we talked about today? And that's where I'm happy to offer you the opportunity to speak with me. We can do a complimentary consult where we walk through all of these applied to your specific people strategies. Or maybe you don't have a formal documented people strategy in place. Time is ticking. Don't forget, a strategic workforce strategy is something that is going to fuel the future growth of your organization. So thank you for taking the time to being in the room when it happened, I appreciate you taking the time. Please come back often and check this out. Reach out to me by email or cell, and we can schedule your consult. Go into the description for this video. All my contact details are there for easy reference. Like this video if you found it informative. Please, there's 600 videos like this on my YouTube channel. Subscribe to my YouTube channel. Greatly appreciated. Greatly appreciated. The only thing that's going to ensure success is your people. Strategy without people is irrelevant. Operational efficiency comes from your people's performance and productivity. Thank you so much for your time today, and I wish you much success in your future business, career, and professional development initiatives. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.